At the epicenter of global power, the United Nations General Assembly witnessed a pivotal moment when an unexpected voice broke through the familiar atmosphere. Ibrahim Traore, the young president of Burkina Faso, emerged not with the usual plea for aid, but with a stunning declaration. His nation would lead the charge in self-sufficient rice production for African countries, gradually replacing reliance on international aid programs like USAID. This was not merely an economic plan, but a direct challenge to the old order, a bold proclamation of a new era of African self-reliance. This ideological confrontation promises to reshape how the world, particularly figures like Hegseth, perceives the dawn of African autonomy. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. In the vibrant atmosphere of the General Assembly, where international leaders gathered to discuss pressing global issues from food security to climate change, Traoré's presence drew particular attention. The 20-something president, with a calm demeanor but resolute eyes, was not just a rising figure in African politics. He had quickly become a symbol of resistance and self-reliance, embodying the aspiration to break free from the shadow of dependency that has haunted the continent for decades. As Traoré stepped to the podium, his opening words silenced the room. He spoke without preamble or flourish. He candidly outlined Burkina Faso's bold vision, an initiative born from real experiences of hunger, scarcity, and the hollow promises of foreign aid. He didn't just aim to address food security. He sought to restore dignity and build a prosperous future for his people, relying on their own labor and resources. This message was not just a statement, but a thunderclap heralding change. When Ibrahim Traore concluded his opening, a near-tangible silence enveloped the General Assembly Hall. It was not the silence of consensus, but a moment where the audience grappled with a message so profoundly different, unprecedented at this international forum. Traoré didn't let the silence linger. He took a deep breath, his steady gaze sweeping across the faces in the room, as if piercing the core of the issue: ingrained dependency. For decades, Traoré began, his voice warm yet resonant. Many African nations have relied on foreign aid to ensure food security. Programs like USAID have played a significant role, undeniably saving millions from starvation. But it's time we ask ourselves frankly, does this aid truly bring us freedom, or does it merely perpetuate a vicious cycle of dependency? His question cut like a blade through the veneer of humanitarian ideals cloaked in self-interest. The room stirred slightly, some delegates exchanging surprised glances, others visibly uncomfortable. They had never heard an African leader speak so bluntly on such a global stage. Traoré pressed on, his voice now firm and brimming with confidence. Burkina Faso, with the unity of its people and support from regional partners, is launching a groundbreaking program we call Rice for All. In the coming months, we will begin exporting rice to neighboring West African countries, replacing a significant portion of the food traditionally provided as aid by international organizations, including USAID. This time there was no silence. A wave of astonishment swept the room. A few tentative claps rang out, but most delegates remained stunned, struggling to reframe their thoughts. This was not just a policy announcement. It was a direct challenge, a vehement rejection of the role global powers assumed in shaping the fate of developing nations. Traoré understood the weight of his words. He paused, letting the message sink in, then explained that his program extended beyond agriculture. "Our goal is clear," he said, his gaze unwavering. "We want Africa to feed Africa. We want our children to grow up believing they can rely on their own land and labor, not on external programs often tied to complex political interests." He painted a vivid picture of the future. Lush rice fields stretching under the African sun, granaries brimming with golden harvests. Trucks carrying rice across borders not as aid, but as the product of African ingenuity and perseverance. It was a vision of dignity, of true freedom, where nations no longer bowed for scraps. External aid has its place, but it cannot be a permanent solution, Traoré declared, his voice now charged with strength and conviction. True transformation begins when we take control of our own destiny. And that is exactly what we are building here. As he concluded his speech, applause erupted, no longer hesitant. It was the sound of awe, admiration, and perhaps a faint unease from those clinging to the old power structures. Many African leaders, accustomed to accepting aid with strings attached, felt a new breeze of hope and national pride stirring. Among those present, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth listened with keen interest, mixed with deep skepticism. A staunch advocate of American strategic interests, Hegseth saw Traoré's Rice for All announcement as more than an agricultural initiative. He immediately recognized its strategic implications. Burkina Faso's economic self-reliance could shift the security balance in the Sahel, where the U.S. supports allies in counter-terrorism efforts. This could reduce dependence on U.S. defense cooperation programs, an issue he deemed worthy of close scrutiny. Upon returning to Ouagadougou, Traoré convened an urgent meeting with his cabinet and top agricultural experts. He listened to concerns about funding shortages, weak infrastructure, and the reluctance of some citizens accustomed to aid dependency. "Mr. President, we must be realistic," a seasoned economic advisor cautioned. "Aid is our lifeline. If we cut it off, we'll starve." Traoré heard all the concerns, but his resolve didn't waver. He understood the risks, but believed in something greater, the dignity and resilience of his people. "Our lifeline isn't aid, it's our land and our sweat," he replied to the advisor. "It's time we stand up, cultivate, and feed ourselves. This is the only path to true freedom." To turn his vision into reality, Traoré mobilized a formidable team of local agricultural experts, Sunsung scientists, passionate young engineers, and seasoned farmers with generations of knowledge. He believed solutions must come from those who know Africa's land and climate best. Among them was Dr. Aminata Diallo, an agricultural scientist who studied abroad but always yearned to revitalize her homeland's agriculture. She had spent years researching drought-resistant rice varieties suited to the Sahel's harsh soils. Under Traoré's leadership, her work finally found widespread application, offering hope for millions of arid hectares. The preparation phase began with bold, innovative steps. First was a large-scale survey of land and climate to identify the most promising areas for rice cultivation. Teams of engineers and farmers fanned out across provinces, collecting soil samples, analyzing water sources, and mapping detailed plans. Simultaneously, Traoré launched a national campaign called Pride in Our Fields, urging citizens, especially the youth, to return to agriculture. "We're not just planting rice. We're sowing hope," he said in a national radio address. "We're building our future with our own hands." One of the biggest challenges was water. Drought has long been the nemesis of Burkina Faso's agriculture. To tackle this, Traoré introduced an ambitious plan, investing in innovative irrigation systems. Instead of waiting for international aid for large-scale projects, he encouraged communities to build small dams, deep wells, and water-saving irrigation systems using local technology and ingenuity. The government provided materials and expertise, while citizens contributed labor. Small canals and simple but effective dams began sprouting across the landscape, transforming barren lands into green oases. Alongside irrigation improvements, the program focused on sustainable farming techniques. Instead of costly, soil-damaging chemical fertilizers, Traoré promoted organic fertilizers, crop rotation, and climate-adaptive farming methods. Small training centers were established in every village, where experts like Dr. Diallo directly taught farmers about soil care, seed selection, and natural pest control. This marked a shift from traditional to modern agriculture while remaining in harmony with nature. The true strength of the Rice for All program lay in mobilizing the people. Traoré knew a national project couldn't succeed without widespread participation. Volunteer campaigns were organized regularly, with thousands of youth, students, and even elders joining in land reclamation, canal digging, and planting. The atmosphere was electric, filled with laughter and folk songs. It was a massive community event, a vivid testament to Burkina Faso's unity. Among the most inspiring stories of this transformation is that of Amadou, a 22-year-old who once dreamed of leaving his village for opportunities in Europe. His family had struggled through repeated failed harvests, and a prosperous life in the countryside seemed unattainable. He had considered dropping out of school to work in the city. But when the Rice for All program launched, Amadou heeded Traoré's call. He joined one of the first agricultural training courses, learning advanced planting techniques, efficient water management, and soil care. Amadou didn't just gain skills, he discovered the meaning of his work. He felt pride watching green rice shoots emerge from land once thought barren. He began to see a bright future in his homeland, one he had only dreamed of abroad. With the program's support, Amadou's family achieved an unprecedented bumper harvest. He no longer wanted to migrate. Instead, Amadou became a community role model, a passionate young man sharing his knowledge and experience with other farmers, inspiring them toward a self-reliant future. Though much work remains, the first seeds of Rice for All have taken root and are thriving with vigor. The faith and hope of Burkina Faso's people have been ignited, transforming them into true soldiers in the fight against poverty and dependency. This is not just an agricultural project, it's a cultural revolution, a spiritual rebirth of a nation. The initial signs of success are drawing attention not only regionally, but also from skeptical eyes in distant power centers, foreshadowing an inevitable confrontation. As news of Rice for All and Burkina Faso's self-reliance revolution spread, it reached beyond newspapers and UN forums, infiltrating the corridors of power in Washington, D.C. There, Pete Hegseth, with his extensive military background, received reports on Traoré's initiative. He immediately convened a meeting with senior advisors. Hegseth directed intelligence agencies and the State Department to assess the program's impact on U.S. strategic interests in West Africa. Hegseth believed Rice for All was a naively dangerous project driven by unrealistic ideals. He and his team began crafting a campaign to undermine Traoré's credibility and his program. Their first move was a negative media campaign. Analyses on conservative-leaning television channels and newspapers influenced by Hegseth's perspective began to proliferate. They posed skeptical questions. Is there a hidden hand behind Traoré? Is the self-sufficiency program a front for anti-Western forces? Is corruption rife in the Rice for All project? Or even, can Burkina Faso sustain this program without Western expertise? International development experts, closely tied to major aid organizations, were enlisted to provide skeptical analyses. They highlighted macroeconomic risks, warned of severe infrastructure shortages, and predicted Burkina Faso would soon beg for aid again when faced with weather or market challenges. This program is a huge gamble, one expert opined in the Wall Street Journal. It could plunge Burkina Faso into deeper poverty if it fails. Beyond media, Hegseth employed diplomatic and financial pressure. U.S. Diplomatic missions in neighboring African countries were instructed to express concern about Traoré's program, implying that supporting Burkina Faso could jeopardize cooperation and aid from Washington. Warning phone calls were made to African leaders, reminding them of annual U.S. aid and the consequences of straying. The goal was to isolate Traoré, stripping him of support from the very neighbors he aimed to help. But Ibrahim Traoré was not a leader easily swayed. He had anticipated these negative reactions and prepared to counter them. Rather than retreating or conceding, Traoré chose to confront the criticism and pressure head-on. He organized a series of international press conferences, inviting journalists and observers worldwide to Burkina Faso to witness the truth firsthand. In these press conferences, Traoré displayed remarkable composure. He avoided pointless arguments or confrontational rhetoric. Instead, he presented concrete figures and data. Hectares of reclaimed land, soaring rice yields, trained farmers, and success stories of communities escaping poverty. He emphasized the program's transparency and efficiency, releasing detailed financial reports to refute corruption allegations. "We welcome all scrutiny, positive or negative," Traoré said at an international press conference, his resolute gaze fixed on the camera. "Criticism only makes us stronger, as it forces us to prove ourselves through actions, not empty words. We're not a nation seeking confrontation, but one seeking freedom and dignity. What we do is for our people, for Africa's future, not against anyone." He also deftly called for African solidarity. In speeches to neighboring nations, Traoré repeatedly stressed that rice for all was not just Burkina Faso's project, but a replicable model, a shared path for the continent. He reminded other leaders of the stringent conditions tied to aid promises, the lack of respect for sovereignty, and the delays in addressing people's real needs. "We've learned that only self-reliance brings true freedom," he affirmed. "It's time we write our own story together." Traoré's resilience and transparency, coupled with early evidence of the program's success, began to backfire on his critics. While Hegseth and his allies continued their pressure campaign, more journalists, analysts, and even some moderate Western politicians started questioning Washington's motives. Was the U.S. truly concerned for Africa's development, or merely afraid of losing influence? This question became a public debate, weakening Hegseth's stance. Traoré knew he wasn't just facing a powerful government, but an entrenched mindset. Yet, every challenge was an opportunity to prove the strength of a steadfast will and a righteous vision. The fire of resistance he ignited didn't just burn in Burkina Faso. It began to spread quietly across the continent, setting the stage for a greater transformation. In Burkina Faso, the seeds of hope have taken root and are growing vigorously. The first harvest of the Rice for All program exceeded expectations. Lush, grain-heavy rice fields, stretching endlessly under the African sun, stand as the most vivid testament to Traoré's vision. Yields have skyrocketed, not only meeting domestic needs, but also generating a significant surplus for export. The first rice shipments, carrying the pride of Burkina Faso's people, began crossing borders into neighboring countries like Mali, Niger, and Côte d'Ivoire. These were not aid packages, but fair commercial transactions, exchanged on principles of equality and mutual respect. People in these nations received Burkina Faso's rice with surprise and joy. They were accustomed to receiving rice from international aid programs, often tied to stringent conditions and sometimes a lack of respect. Now they were buying products from an African neighbor produced by their own brothers and sisters. A sense of new connection, a shared pride began to blossom. This initial success sparked a wave of admiration and a desire to learn across the continent. African leaders, weary of dependency and empty promises, began looking to Burkina Faso as a beacon. Phone calls and invitations for visits flooded Traoré's office. Among the first visitors was the president of Mali, a country also grappling with food insecurity and external interference. He came to Burkina Faso not to discuss aid, but to witness the miracle Traoré had created. Guided by Traoré, the Malian president visited agricultural cooperatives, spoke with farmers working tirelessly in the fields, and toured overflowing rice storehouses. He couldn't hide his amazement when meeting Amadou, the young man Traoré often mentioned, now a dynamic agricultural coordinator teaching advanced farming techniques to those older than him. "This is what we've dreamed of for so long," the Malian president declared at a joint press conference. "We're tired of begging. Burkina Faso has shown we can stand on our own, feed ourselves. We will learn from this model and replicate it in our country." Soon after, delegations from Niger, Côte d'Ivoire, and other nations followed. They came not only to learn farming techniques, but to understand how Traoré had ignited a spirit of self-reliance in his people. They were inspired by Traoré's determination, the unity of Burkina Faso's farmers, and the vision of an Africa that no longer bows. The Rice for All program was not just an agricultural project, but a cultural movement, a powerful affirmation of African identity. Traoré tirelessly emphasized that food self-sufficiency was the first step toward complete freedom. He held community talks and workshops, sharing his vision and encouraging people to believe in their own capabilities. Songs about self-reliant rice and African dignity began echoing across villages. To formalize this wave of self-reliance, a special African Union summit was convened in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa. Ibrahim Traore, now a towering figure, was the focal point of the summit. His speech was no longer just a statement but a rallying cry. He shared Burkina Faso's experience and called on other African nations to act together, building a network of food and economic self-sufficiency. "We've lived too long in the shadow of dependency," Traoré declared to the continent's leaders, his voice brimming with passion. "We've learned that aid can be a double-edged sword, carrying invisible strings. Now we have a choice: continue begging or sow and reap our own harvest. Burkina Faso has chosen the latter, and we believe this is the path for all of Africa." He stressed that internal unity was key. "When we collaborate, when we share knowledge and resources, our strength will be unmatched. We don't need others telling us what to do. We have enough land, people, and wisdom to shape our own destiny." Traoré's call received a powerful response. Many presidents voiced support, pledging to launch similar programs in their countries. "He's proving Africa can feed itself," a veteran Nigerian leader said. "We're tired of relying on foreign aid. It's time we take control of our destiny." Beyond words, bilateral and multilateral agricultural cooperation agreements were signed at the summit. An African Agricultural Self-Reliance Fund was proposed, with initial funding from member states, bypassing external donors. The rise of Rice for All and Traoré's self-reliance movement began reshaping global perceptions. Africa was no longer seen solely as a continent of hunger, conflict, or aid. The world began to see a continent of potential, with bold leaders and people eager to rise. International development organizations, scholars, and even journalists from once skeptical major outlets sent delegations to Burkina Faso to study and report on the Traoré phenomenon. Africa, from a continent that receives, was transforming into one that creates. As the summit's echoes and the resounding success of Rice for All reached Washington, the atmosphere in Pete Hegseth's office grew tenser than ever. Initially, a fierce critic who sought to undermine Traoré's program, he could no longer ignore the undeniable evidence. Reports from independent organizations, vivid footage from Burkina Faso, and analyses from outlets not aligned with him all pointed to one reality: soaring rice yields, markedly improved farmers' lives, and a wave of national pride sweeping West Africa. At times, Hegseth felt anger, but then a sense of powerlessness in refuting what was unfolding. It forced him to reconsider everything. In a closed Pentagon meeting, an advisor suggested, "Sir, Traoré's program is fostering economic stability, which benefits our security goals in the Sahel. We should consider a cooperative approach, like enhancing military training or intelligence sharing to strengthen ties with Burkina Faso as they grow more self-reliant. Another proposed a high-level security delegation to the Sahel, including Burkina Faso, to assess the situation and explore new cooperation opportunities. Initially cautious, Hegseth insisted U.S. security interests were paramount. "We can't let economic initiatives overshadow defense commitments," he said. Yet, faced with the reality of economic stability's positive impact on regional security, he approved a strategic shift. A security delegation, coordinated by the Defense and State Departments, would visit the Sahel, officially, to discuss security cooperation and assess the impact of economic stability on counter-terrorism efforts. When Hegseth landed at Ouagadougou's airport, he was greeted by President Ibrahim Traore in a simple but meaningful ceremony. No lavish red carpet or ostentatious honor, guard just sincerity and a hint of curiosity from both sides. Traore, with a calm smile, shook Hegseth's hand. "Welcome to Burkina Faso, Secretary Hegseth," he said, his tone friendly yet confident. "We're honored to host you so you can see firsthand what we're building." Hegseth, though maintaining politeness, couldn't hide the scrutiny in his gaze. "Thank you, Mr. President. I look forward to learning more about your Rice for All program," he replied, his tone still tinged with skepticism. Over a day and a half, Traore personally guided Hegseth and his delegation through key projects. The tour began with vast, lush rice fields stretching to the horizon. Hegseth saw community-built irrigation systems, simple but effective solar-powered pumps, and meticulously tended rice rows using sustainable farming techniques. He observed farmers beaming with pride, working tirelessly far from the starving, downtrodden image he once held. At a model agricultural cooperative, Hegseth spoke with farmers. He met Amadou again, the young man highlighted in Traore's speeches, now a confident cooperative coordinator. Amadou guided Hegseth through new rice varieties, production cycles, and how they managed finances for fair profits. "Secretary Hegseth," Amadou said, his eyes shining with pride, "we used to wait for aid. Now we create wealth with our own hands. We have jobs, steady income, and control over our future." Hegseth listened, initially nodding politely, but gradually the farmer's confidence and joy impacted him. He saw radiant faces, calloused but vibrant hands. He was used to numbers on reports, but this was his first encounter with living proof of change. After visiting farms, the delegation proceeded to a small agricultural training school where local experts taught young farmers modern techniques, resource management, and even agricultural marketing. Hegseth witnessed the passion of teachers and students, their hunger to learn and build their own future. That evening, a private meeting was held between Traore and Hegseth. No longer a public speech, it was a candid and direct dialogue. Hegseth began with probing questions, seeking flaws or weaknesses in the program. He asked how Rice for All could support counter-terrorism efforts and the challenges Burkina Faso faced amid climate change and regional instability. Traore responded with patience and concrete data, explaining that the program not only ensured food security but also built community trust and unity, reducing the risk of terrorist recruitment. "We're not trying to replace anyone," Traore said, his gaze resolute but not arrogant. "We're building a future where Burkina Faso and the Sahel can stand strong, contributing to collective security. We welcome cooperation on equal terms." Hegseth sat in thought. A pragmatist, he couldn't deny what he'd seen and the people he'd met. He had once believed aid was the only way to save Africa, but now he faced a different model, Traore's model, not a challenge but an opportunity for greater regional stability. He acknowledged that economic self-reliance could underpin more sustainable security programs, which the US could support through military training and intelligence sharing. Mr. President, Hegseth finally conceded, his tone noticeably softer. This is truly impressive. I must say, I have a different perspective now. But do you truly believe you can sustain this without significant external help? Traore smiled faintly. We're not saying we don't need cooperation, Secretary Hegseth. We're saying we don't need dependency. We're creating our own solutions, and we hope other nations will look to our example and follow. It's about equal partnership, not reliance. Hegseth was at a loss for words. He realized he was facing a leader not seeking approval or recognition, but building something greater than any political dispute. The visit became a transformative experience, forcing Pete Hegseth to confront an undeniable truth about Africa's will and potential. In the days following the visit, Hegseth remained uncharacteristically silent, a departure from his usual demeanor. The US media began to speculate. Had the trip not met expectations? Or had something profoundly shifted in his perspective? Then, the unexpected happened. In a live national television interview, he delivered a statement that stunned the political and international development communities. With a reflective expression and resolute eyes, he said, "I've just returned from Burkina Faso. I must admit before the trip I had certain preconceptions about President Traoré's Rice for All program. I thought it was an unrealistic idea, even a naive challenge to the global aid system. But what I witnessed completely changed my mind." Hegseth paused, as if still processing his newfound emotions and insights. President Traoré isn't just talking, he's done the impossible. I visited the rice fields, the training centers, and spoke with the farmers. They're not waiting for aid, they're working, producing, feeding their families and nation. They're filled with dignity and pride. This young president is proving that local solutions can address global problems. This is something we all, especially those in developed nations, can and must learn from. This public admission from Pete Hegseth, a highly influential figure and once the program's fiercest critic, caused a seismic shift. It wasn't just a personal change of heart, it was a powerful signal from Washington that views on aid and development might be evolving. Following Hegseth's speech, an official letter from the US, with broad stakeholder consensus, was sent to President Traoré. The letter not only praised the achievements of Rice for All, but also expressed willingness to explore new forms of cooperation based on respect and empowerment for African nations. This marked a historic turning point, heralding the start of a new era in international relations. The ripple effects of this admission spread widely. Beyond the US, other developing nations began to see Burkina Faso's model as a guiding star. From Southeast Asia to Latin America, governments sent delegations to study Traoré's approach, how he mobilized the people, and how he built confidence in self-reliance. Success stories from Burkina Faso's agricultural cooperatives were incorporated into university curricula, becoming case studies in sustainable development. International aid organizations, once central to dependency, were forced to rethink their strategies. Instead of one-way aid, they shifted toward programs focused on empowerment, skill building, and fostering local capacity. USAID, under public pressure and a shift in government thinking, began prioritizing sustainable projects that promoted self-reliance over short-term aid packages. The philosophy of helping them help themselves became not just a slogan but a genuine guiding principle. Africa's global image transformed entirely. No longer defined solely by hunger, conflict, or need for rescue, Africa was now seen as a continent of potential, innovation, and resilient will. Foreign investors began seeking agricultural business opportunities in Africa, not as aid but as equal partners. 5 years after the historic UN speech, a grand celebration for the Rice for All program was held in Ouagadougou. Thousands of citizens gathered in the square, joined by delegations from dozens of African nations and senior officials from international organizations. Ibrahim Traore, now a global icon of self-reliance, took the stage amid thunderous cheers. He not only recounted the arduous journey, but looked to the future with unwavering faith. Among the honored guests was Amadou, the young farmer, now a talented agricultural coordinator and community leader, stood as the most vivid proof of the program's transformative impact. Amadou, with poise and confidence, stood beside Traoré, representing Africa's youth empowered to shape their own destiny. Their presence together touched the hearts of millions, conveying a powerful message about the true legacy Traoré had built. Not just rice, but transformed lives, ignited dreams, and faith in the limitless potential of African people. Traoré smiled at Amadou, then turned to the audience. His voice resonated, no longer dry political rhetoric, but a heartfelt expression of love for his people. What we witness today, he said, is not just numbers on reports or mere achievements. These are transformed lives. These are dreams realized on this very soil. This is the faith, the will to rise, of every Burkinabe, of every African. His message didn't stop at Burkina Faso's borders. The power of self-reliance, national pride, and creative capacity spread relentlessly. Neighboring countries, gradually learning from the Rice for All model, began to sow, harvest, and distribute their own crops. New-style agricultural cooperatives sprang up across West Africa, transforming arid lands into lush, thriving rice fields. The trucks carrying rice were no longer symbols of relief, but proof of prosperity born from Africa's own strength. In the future, Ibrahim Traoré's vision continued to be forged, expanding beyond food security. He believed agricultural self-reliance was just the beginning. Africa would advance in technology, education, and healthcare, grounded in principles of self-sufficiency, unity, and innovation. Africa's younger generations, inspired by Amadou's story and Traoré's leadership, would stand confidently on the global stage as recipients but as creators of value, as equal partners. The image of endless green rice fields under the African sky, shimmering in golden sunlight, became a vivid symbol of a bright future. It was the future Ibrahim Traoré dared to dream and made reality, a future where Africa could fully feed itself, determine its own destiny, and proudly assert its place on the world map. His legacy lies not only in the golden grains of rice, but in the seeds of hope that have taken root deep in the hearts of every African. The story of Ibrahim Traoré and the Rice for All program is not just an epic of one nation, but holds profound lessons for us all. First, the story underscores the power of vision and unwavering resolve. Traoré dared to challenge the old order, dreaming of a self-reliant future many deemed unrealistic. In life, when facing prejudices or beaten paths, we need a clear vision of what we want and steadfast pursuit despite external doubts or pressures, just as Traoré confronted Pete Hegseth. The story highlights the value of inner strength and self-reliance. Instead of waiting for aid, Traoré focused on harnessing Burkina Faso's resources and human potential. Amadou, who went from wanting to emigrate to becoming a proud agricultural coordinator, is a clear testament. The lesson is to believe in our own capabilities. Instead of always seeking external help, we should solve problems ourselves and hone our skills. Finally, the story is an affirmation of unity and sharing. Traoré didn't act alone. He mobilized an entire nation, from farmers to experts, to sow the seeds of hope together. The spread of Rice for All across Africa shows that when individuals or communities unite, they can achieve monumental change, overcoming barriers. Whether in work or life, coming together, sharing knowledge, and supporting one another yields results far beyond individual efforts, building a prosperous and sustainable future for all. If Ibrahim Traoré's story of self-reliance and faith has inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to join us in exploring more meaningful journeys. Thank you for being with us, and see you in the next video, where the seeds of hope continue to sprout.